So yes, this is the fifth time I've presented these results, and it's effectively a market research debrief, and it's based on various research pieces that have taken place this year through Asia Research, and some of you may have taken part in them, so thanks for that, and we hope we can rely on your continued participation in these surveys that run each year. So one of the data sources is the seventh annual buyer survey, which was a telephone-based surveys of corporations. That's market research or insight managers who commission market research with external agencies at least once a year. That took place in April and May this year. It was Singapore and Indonesia. I'm actually really going to present the results from Singapore. There's just one reference to Indonesia because it's an emerging market. It's quite interesting, just one bit of data on that. And then there's the stakeholder survey, which was conducted online in August, so 183 surveys. And then just recently, I've been doing some depth interviews with the heads of the panel and research technology companies to understand. It's kind of a review of the industry for this year, key developments in research technology for the year. I'll be drawing on some examples or some findings from those interviews that I did. So let's move on, and this is from the stakeholder survey, just establishing the source of business for market research. This is across the region, although there's a high representation of Singapore-based stakeholders in this survey. So we asked, this is among the among the supply side, among agencies. What is the leading source of business to you? Second and third most common source of business to you. So you'll see that multinational corporations are the main source of business for market research, so about 80% of companies are getting work from that, followed by large local corporations. Mid-sized corporations are also important. Usually the third source of business to agencies has grown slightly over the last year. And there's a fair amount of business between agencies themselves, subcontracting, fieldwork, etc. And then the government and public sector it actually grew from 2014 to 2015. And there's other sources of business like from advertising agencies and management consultancies. But what you'll see year on year is it's fairly stable. So there's no major changes in terms of where the business is coming from. Now, based on the buyer survey, clients were asked, compared to the previous year, had your research budgets gone up or down? So this is for Singapore. You'll see that tracked since 2012, the market has been relatively static. I mean, in 2014, there was a bit of an uplift, 2015 as well. But you'll see in 2016 that actually budgets have not moved much over compared to the previous year. Now, it is it's interesting when we compare that to Indonesia, where we also did the survey. Some of the emerging markets had been very buoyant. You'll see, particularly in 2012 and 13, the proportion of clients reporting an increase in budget was quite substantial compared to those reporting a decline. But what you will see is that once buoyant market of Indonesia has softened. So in 2016, again, it's quite similar to Singapore, that it's fairly static. So what this is showing is that the once buoyant emerging markets are not growing as much as they were. Now, back to Singapore. We asked how many research projects you are undertaking each year. So it's been averaging at about 7 or 8 over the last few years. But what's worth noting here is just in 2016 that about 1 in 5 clients are now undertaking at least 20 different research projects a year. Now, you saw earlier that their budgets are static, but there are more projects. Now, what this does mean is that clients are undertaking more frequent projects, but at a lower cost. And that's really has been aided through technology, different means of data collection. So clients are taking advantage of that and doing more surveys within their budget. In terms of the type of research supplier used in the last year, there are various ways clients can source research. The main sources are through either the large multinational research firms or independent agencies. So they're both leading, and in fact they're now neck and neck. Independent agencies had actually grown their market penetration quite significantly from 2012 to 2013. So 2012 it was only about half, and it has grown, and they are pretty much neck and neck with large multinational firms. But what's notable, and it links to what I just said, was the use of online panel companies. That's corporations directly engaging online panel companies. Was around 40% over the years, and just in the last year has jumped to 60%. So we'll see a lot of insight departments going direct to those panel companies just for data collection and for doing the research in-house. Now, paradoxically, DIY research like SurveyMonkey was quite commonly used by clients, but has actually fallen back this year to 25%. So it could be a case that online research is getting more complex in terms of the type of surveys we do. So the clients are going to professional panel companies to do that, and they're always happy to serve. The other observation here is community panels. It's not actually grown as we expected. Community panels is actually one of the fastest, or has been one of the fastest growing forms of research in Western markets, particularly in the US. But there had been some early adopters of community panels in Asia, but it's stabilized around 16-17%. Actually, anyone here run community panels? Just raise your hand. See, not many. And the reason is, well, it is viewed as being quite expensive to set up. But the other thing is, having spoken to some of the community panel companies, is that there's actually, it's not just the financial investment, but it's also the level of resource that's required within the organization to actually make them work. That is, to get internal buying within the organization. And for community panels to work, they have to be used and used regularly. So a lot of clients simply don't have the resources to sustain community panels in this way. The other thing is you'll see of all the other types of supplier research have fallen back. Management consultants, freelance consultants, academic institutions, branding consultants. Their penetration in the market has fallen back in the last year. So it seems like there's some kind of rationalization in the use of suppliers. So big agencies, independent agencies, panel companies have the lion's share of the business. And clients are quite happy to move their business around. The number of different vendors used in the last year averages at about 4, has grown a bit since 2012. The type of research being undertaken, it's ad hoc qual, ad hoc quant, and tracking studies. Those are the main forms of research. But in terms of the main type of projects commissioned, there has been a rebound in qualitative research. So in terms of projects most frequently commissioned, ad hoc qual is on par, if not slightly ahead, of ad hoc quantitative. So there has been a talk of something of a renaissance in qualitative research, and that's where independent agencies are excelling. Right, so some important market research for agencies here. How do clients put agencies in their consideration set? Well, it's mainly based on specialism. So if an agency has a reputation as being strong in that field, that sector, or have an experience of similar projects, that's most likely to get them into the consideration set for the brief. Other aspects include team members, track record of good servicing, the team lead, whether they're an approved vendor, track record of competitive prices. But lower down, you'll see the familiarity of the agency to internal clients and whether they're a big name is actually ranks the lowest in terms of whether it's in the consideration set. So just being a big name will not guarantee you being in that consideration set. In terms of the factors that will determine the final selection of the research agency, this is the top three. Now, before you groan and say, oh, it's a price-driven industry, I sometimes take the other view, is that 42% of clients did not put price in their top three. That's another way of reading this. I mean, it would be unusual if price was not in the top three. But you'll see that experience of similar projects, quality of the proposal, and innovation is all part of the deciding factor in awarding the contract. Now, interestingly, we asked agencies what you think was the final selection, or was part of the final selection. And they tended to overestimate this down here, relationship, familiarity with vendor. Yeah, they think the relationship is more important than it really is. And they underestimate the quality of the proposal, and even a little bit the innovation. So it does go to show, I mean, it is a meritocracy, so it's an open market, which I'll show you in a moment. Circumstances where you would use a small agency. What's quite characteristic of Asia, I think, is that the market is polarized between big agencies and small agencies, and even the bigger agencies, they're all consolidating because there's not enough room for big agencies. So you see that the smaller agencies are advancing in the market. They have grown their penetration from 2012 and now are neck and neck. So what are the circumstances where clients would use a smaller agency? Specialism, perception of lower cost at least, single market studies, fast turnaround projects, or they're known to you personally, like the lead consultant. And it is, to a degree, a people-driven business, although reputation and specialism of the agency is important in terms of getting in the consideration set. The expertise is viewed as being mostly within the project lead, the individual themselves, rather than the agency. And are you willing to use smaller agencies for multi-country projects across Asia? The majority are saying yes, and this is something that has been facilitated via technology, that things like online research, the panel companies are providing the smaller agencies the infrastructure and the reach and the data collection capabilities to allow those small agencies to do multi-country projects. Who influences the choice of vendor? Well, it's mainly the research department, and that hasn't changed much in the last year. There's still cases, though, where senior management, marketing and sales departments would have the most influence, but that's in a minority of cases. And how free are you as a client to use new suppliers? That is, do you have complete freedom, or are you mostly free to use new suppliers? And you'll see that the majority of the industry does have that freedom. And how easy is it to onboard a new supplier? It is generally easier, although those saying it's fairly difficult has grown from 23% to 38%. So there's a little bit more paperwork, maybe a little bit more bureaucracy, compliance issues in order to get the vendor approved. But what this does show is that it is an open market for new agencies. Source of budgets for research, mainly coming from annual budgets. There may be ad hoc requests, for example, from management directives. Now, what this is notable is research that's prompted by strategic new investments from corporations has fallen from 47% to 30%. It seems like there is less investment, less strategic investments from corporations, for example, going into new markets or general expansion. And that does link to the kind of cautiousness, economic uncertainty that maybe clients are feeling. And how the market research budget is spent, it's actually spread around a fair bit, although the local research department gets most of the budget. You'll see that in the last year, there has been a move to distribute budgets more across the various business lines within the company and more centralization, particularly globally, global centralization of budgets. So in terms of the outlook for the industry, the expected rate of change for the industry over the next 5 years, this is a question asked each year. How much do you expect the industry to change? Most are saying, well, it will change quite a lot in terms of the type of organizations in the market, different products and services coming in. But people aren't saying that the industry will, or the research departments and suppliers today are going to disappear. So there's still room for the big agents. There's still room for the mainstream agencies. In terms of how you see the balance of opportunity and threat for the research industry, so do you see far more opportunity, somewhat more opportunity, more threat, or far more threat? You'll see that on balance, the industry is quite positive for the outlook, so that's clients and agencies overall. But what you do see is that the number or the proportion of stakeholders that report far more opportunity is reducing over the years. The middle management seems a bit more optimistic than in previous years. Not sure what to read into that. Associate directors and research directors getting a bit more pessimistic, but the samples are a bit small here. But if there are any associate directors here, perhaps you can tell us what that's all about. And likewise, the most senior management, they weren't as optimistic about the prospects for the industry as compared to 2013, but still on balance, still quite positive. And those opportunities include, so various things asked as to where you think the opportunity lies, the main opportunity, second opportunity, or third opportunity. And the leading one that has been leading over the years is leveraging on technology. Now, it shows a fall there from 2014. That's because a new measure was introduced here, which was new methods like eye tracking and big data, which could, that's technology related. So it's still all about technology. Adding value through greater insight. Social media, that was more hype in 2013. That wasn't seen these days as so much of an opportunity. And now, these are things ranking a bit lower. Now, this was quite interesting. You'll see growing consumerism in emerging markets was an opportunity, even for agencies in Singapore, because they would be maybe doing regional work with emerging markets in Southeast Asia. That's fallen considerably, so it's no longer so agencies can no longer rely on that growing consumerism nor organic growth of the market research industry, because there isn't really so much these days. Threats to the industry, as always, price pressure, although perhaps not as acute as in previous years. Multinational scaling back, again, second year running, that is seen as the second biggest threat to the market research industry. And as we saw earlier, there is scaling back in terms of research driven by new investments. Twinned with that is economic uncertainty. The other thing worth noting here is the move to insourcing of research has been quite big over the years, and that has stabilized somewhat. So it's actually perceived as less of a threat now because maybe clients have insourced what they can and the industry has adjusted to that market reality. The other thing is poor quality fieldwork has reduced somewhat as a threat. And again, I would put that down to technology, that we have the technology now to reach consumers better and all the inbuilt quality control measures that allow us to verify what are genuine online surveys. And somewhat combined with that is low respondent cooperation rates, which is what our entire industry relies on consumers willing to give answers. And that was seen, has over the years been seen as a threat to the industry. But again, technology is allowing us to reach consumers in different ways, and in fact that's what some of the papers we're going to be talking about today will be covering. The technology opportunity, this is based on the interviews I conducted with some of the heads of the technology and panel companies. They're reporting a lot of that is driven by the end clients themselves. That the end clients want more speed, they want online reporting, dashboards. So that's what's actually driving a lot of the technology development, as opposed to the agencies themselves, who may have some vested interest, for example, in maintaining their offline data collection facilities. The other thing is in 2016 is the level of automation in end-to-end solutions. For example, doing extremely fast surveys, they're usually very simple surveys, highly templated, and maybe surveys conducted by the marketing departments themselves rather than the research departments. But there is a view that the research industry is lagging behind a bit in terms of the realities of mobile as compared to the advertising industry. For example, we're not doing surveys that are suited to younger consumers, travelers, and there's still an issue about interview length and mobile compatibility. But mobile does provide opportunities in terms of in-the-moment research, vox pops, diaries. Passive data collection is a big area, and we'll be talking a bit about that. Online B2B, though, has got some way to go, but potential with loyalty schemes. And the main issue, though, is that technology will not replace judgment. That is, clients will still rely on the full service agency in order to make the judgment from the data that is collected.